Dear students, a warm good morning to all of you, and welcome to the first session on aquatic microbiology. Microbiology, as we have known, is being found to be prevalent in various areas. You have come across microbiology in the environment, microbiology in the food, microbiology in industries, and right now we're going to talk about aquatic microbiology. Before we go on to the details of the microbiologic elements, I would like to give you an outline on the aquatic ecosystem. As we all know, the aquatic ecosystem is an ecosystem which has been located within the water bodies. Every ecosystem or in every environment which contributes or which is being associated with a water is referred to as an aquatic ecosystem. And within this ecosystem, we can find that there do exist both macroscopic as well as microscopic organisms. And all of these living forms contribute to the existence as well as the prevalence and the sustenance of that particular ecosystem. Now, when you go to consider the aquatic ecosystem, it can be divided into two different types. One is a freshwater ecosystem and the second one is a marine ecosystem. Now, you know what from the term itself, freshwater. The freshwater ecosystem is an ecosystem which has been considered to have low amount of salt concentrations as well as dissolved salts, and that's why we consider like a term fresh is being given to it. So all natural water which is having a low salt content is coming under the category of the freshwater ecosystem. Now sometimes they would be flowing and sometimes they might be remaining static or slow moving waters would also be there. So in the freshwater ecosystem, if they are flowing, you have examples like rivers, streams, and springs. And if they are static, you have systems like the ponds, lakes, pools, as well as swamps. Now, the second type of ecosystem, aquatic ecosystem, which we have, is mainly the marine ecosystem. So it's just the opposite as that of the freshwater ecosystem. Just as I told you, a freshwater ecosystem is a one which has a low salt concentration, and low salt or low dissolved salts are being present in it. The marine ecosystem is just the reverse of it, in which you have high amount of salt in it. So you should remember it is a water based ecosystem in which high amount of salt has been present. Now, this marine ecosystem, it could be found in different ways. Either it can be seen as a open sea, and the open sea might again further be joined together, and it might also occur as oceans, or you can find it as a coastal. Might be in coastal location. That's why also you can find a marine ecosystem, and also in some estuaries and salt marshes also you can find a marine ecosystem. In addition to this, associated with coral reefs. Okay, you know what are corals? That is sometimes now when if you go to consider what Tuticorin, it has a coral reef which has been associated with the sea water, the sea line itself. So coral reefs would also contain salt water, and sometimes even mangroves. Okay, the mangroves. Now, if you go to Kerala towards what is it? Towards the Arabian Sea itself, there are associated with it, not along with the sea, like ahead of that, you can see certain areas where like there are certain mangroves which have been associated, and in these mangroves, what happens? They will be surrounded by salt water. They are not part of the sea, but are being found to be associated with the with the salt water. So all of these will contribute towards a marine ecosystem. So what do you mean by a freshwater ecosystem? A freshwater ecosystem is a ecosystem which has low concentrations of dissolved salts and other total dissolved solids, and they could be like in different forms, uh, either as ice sheets, ice caps, glaciers, icebergs, bogs, ponds, lakes, rivers, streams, and even underground water if it is considered if it has a low concentration of dissolved salt, that would also be considered to be as a fresh water. So any naturally occurring water except the sea water and brackish water comes under the category of fresh water. And what do you mean by the marine ecosystem? The marine ecosystems are aquatic systems which are having high levels of dissolved salt. And they could be either the open sea or the open ocean or the deep sea ocean or the coastal marine ecosystems. And all of these ecosystems, which we consider here as a category of marine ecosystem, they are being characterized by the presence of their high levels of dissolved salt. Of course, the features or the characters of these different marine ecosystems also will vary, but all of them will have one thing in common, that is the high level of dissolved salt. Now, if you go to consider the aquatic ecosystem, as I told you, salt is a factor which plays an important role in distinguishing them as freshwater, as salt water. Now, what is the amount of the dissolved salt present, or how extent do they vary? Now, in the case of freshwater, the salt concentration or the dissolved salts would be less than zero point 0.5 parts per thousand, as well as in salt water or in the marine ecosystem, it will be about 30 to 50 parts per thousands of salt or dissolved salts would be present over there. So it's based upon this salinity, that's what we consider, that is a term which we use to define the amount of the dissolved salts. So the salinity would be less than zero point 0.5 parts per thousand for fresh water, and the salt water, it could be 30 to 50 parts per thousand for of salinity in the case of marine ecosystems. The freshwater ecosystem, as I told you earlier, it could be sometimes be considered to be as flowing. And if you find that it is flowing, you call it as a lotic ecosystem. And in the same way, if it has been found to be slow moving or it has been found to be static, as we see in the case of ponds, pools, as well as in lakes, then we call it as a lentic system. So the fresh water, if it's moving, just think O always, the number 0 can, or n something round can always move. So based upon that, we call it as a flowing system or the lotic. And but if it remains static or slow moving, we call it as a lentic ecosystem. Now, if you go to consider the aquatic ecosystem, let it be the freshwater or the marine, it has some common characteristics. Like, of course, the organisms which grow in them would depend upon different characteristics. It would be varied based upon various physical parameters like temperature, the sunlight depth, the oxygen concentration, as well as the available nutrients. All these four factors will greatly influence the distribution of the what living forms in an aquatic ecosystem. I'm not going into details of that right now because each aquatic ecosystem have a different parameter. So we will be discussing that later, and in detail we will be coming later on. So keep in your mind, in the ecosystem, influence of the temperature, the sunlight, the oxygen concentration, as well as the available nutrients will influence the distribution of living forms in it. Let it be large fishes or plants or even microscopic microorganisms are influenced by these parameters. And if you go to consider the organisms or the aquatic organisms which are growing on the surface, okay, we call them one name. Okay, and some of them which are being found to be, if they are being considered to be on the surface, we call them as plankton. The surface dwelling ones are considered to be as plankton, and if it is a microscopic animal, we call it as a zooplankton, and if it is a microscopic plant, we call it as a phytoplankton. And there would be certain free swimming organisms within the aquatic ecosystem. We call them as nekton. That is a term which has been used for the organisms which are free swimming in the ecosystem. They could be include like fish, turtles, whales and all. And sometimes there would be bottom dwelling organisms also, that is which are being attached to the hard surfaces. Then we call those organisms as benthos. Now, for example, mussels, worms, barnacles and all that are being found to be bottom dwelling. Now you might think, why am I using these terms when I am concentrating on microbiology? But the thing is that whatever we are going to learn microbiology, we are associated with these organisms also, microbes would be present. So just common outline, I want to give you a common outline on what all terms which we come across when we learn about the ecosystems and aquatic ecosystems as well as its inhabitants. So you got an idea what are the surface dwellers are called the plankton, the free swimming organisms are considered to be as nekton, and the bottom dwelling organisms are considered to be as benthos. And as we mentioned earlier, it could be either fresh water and salt water. It's just a depiction of the same thing what we discussed earlier. And you can also have, if you go to consider the lakes and the ponds, lakes also we have some distinction, like you have littoral zone, which is a surface one, and it also has a bottom zone which is dark, which is called the benthic zone. And depending upon the ecosystem, different adaptations will be found in the organisms which are living in the ecosystem. Now in the case of catfish, okay, whiskers are being found on the catfish to find food on the bottom, and amphibians burrow into the mud in the winter to avoid freezing. So these are some adaptations which have been found in animals depending upon the aquatic ecosystem. Now the same way as we see in macroscopic organisms, even the microbes also get some specialized characters when they live within an aquatic ecosystem, depending upon the physical parameters as well as the nutrient factors which are being present within the aquatic ecosystem. As we all know, nutrients or the growth of anything, let it be macroscopic or microscopic, it depends mainly on the presence of nutrients within the. So where the nutrients are being found to be higher, what happens? There would be an overgrowth of plants, algae as well as bacteria, and as a result, we can see a visualization also. Some lakes will be considered to be as eutrophic. Eutrophic means what happens? These are areas where the algal growth is being found to be higher. Now, this is a normal lake and this is a algal bloom has been found over here. And what happens? The oxygen of such lakes would be get depleted because there is high growth of these algae and bacteria and all. So, what I need to tell you right now is the influence or the presence of nutrients also greatly contribute to the microbes or the inhabitants in an aquatic ecosystem. Now, whatever be the type of ecosystem, you should see that there would be a food chain which has been present in the aquatic ecosystem. Now, within the water, there would be lots of dissolved organic matter, and this dissolved organic matter can be utilized by various agents like ciliates, bacteria, viruses and all that, and they will consume it. And in turn, this bacteria and these viruses, now the virus can eat a bacteria. At the same time, the virus is also using the organic matter, and the bacteria can be eaten by the ciliate, okay, and the ciliate can be further eaten by the herbivores and the zooplanktons, and these are the primary consumers. And sometimes you can see that the primary consumers also come and eat the dissolved organic matter, and these bacteria can in turn be eaten by protists over here, and the protists can be again eaten by primary consumers. And you can also see there would be certain what primary producers also within an aquatic ecosystem. Like you can have phytoplankton, these are the plants, or they could be there could be also what photosynthetic bacteria like the cyanobacteria within the aquatic ecosystem, which are serving as the primary producers, and they produce what food over there in the aquatic ecosystem. They will utilize the carbon dioxide and they will be providing food. And these primary producers can also be like they can be consumed by the primary consumers, and the primary consumers are in turn eaten by the secondary consumers, and then we have the tertiary consumers, and the tertiary consumers also depend upon the dissolved organic matter. So you can see a food chain does occur within a what in the aquatic ecosystem also, and all of these organisms will try to utilize the dissolved organic matter which is being present in the what aquatic system, and also other elements which are not been out. Now, in this case, you can see the primary consumer is eating a primary producer. It might not be a dissolved organic matter. The undissolved macroscopic elements as well as a microscopic organic matter can also be consumed. So, a loop does occur within an aquatic ecosystem. The dissolved organic matter as well as the undissolved organic matter forms like these fishes, prawns, and all that, they are also being consumed by others, and a what is it? A transfer of nutrients does happen in the aquatic ecosystem, and you can see that even when you look into this itself, you can see that. Though we are just seeing the just the microscopic fishes or turtles and all that in the aquatic ecosystem, microbes also do exist within an aquatic body. It can be found as a primary producer, or sometimes it might also be degrading certain organic matter and utilizing it. So I guess you got an idea about what is the aquatic ecosystem and how a microorganism can live or contribute towards the aquatic ecosystem. And later on, we will be considering what is the distribution of the microorganisms specifically in various aquatic ecosystems. Thank you for now.